Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today we are going to be taking a look at what might be the best deck in the Pokemon trading card game at the moment. Now, I know whenever we say something like that, it sounds hyperbolic, but there are reasons to believe this might be true. We are talking about Mega Gardevoir. Now, this deck has been seeing a little bit of success for a while at the biggest and only, for the time being, regional in the Europe at the moment. It made it into top 8 there. There's another regional going on this weekend in Dortmund, and Gardevoir is seeing an awful lot of hype. Now, I've shown you a deck list for this video, link in the description, but what I haven't done yet is explain the deck. So, starting off, we have got Gardevoir EX. Now, the fact that it's fairy is pretty good. Giratina is a very popular card at the moment. There are several Giratina decks, sometimes just with Hammers and Garbodor, sometimes with Darkrai, sometimes with Xenaeus. Giratina is seeing quite a bit of hype. Gardevoir hits for weakness. That is, you know what? It's pretty good. The weakness to metal is generally pretty good, because there aren't that many big metal decks. What has happened, however, is that people have actually started playing Mega Scizor decks, not necessarily because it's the best deck in the format. I've done a video on Mega Scizor, check the link in the description, but because it's actually a fantastic counter to Gardevoir decks. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, Scizor's not a bad deck, Scizor's a fine deck, it's not the best deck, but it's seen an increase in play because of the weakness advantage it has over Gardevoir. Now, in terms of the attacks on the regular, they're fine, they're nothing great. 120 for free energy, discard an energy attached to Gardevoir, fine. Link Blast, 2 energy, 30 damage, 100 if you've got the same amount of energy on Gardevoir and the defending Pokemon. The one good thing I do like about this is that Luminous Blade will one-hit KO a Giratina even if they have a Fighting Fury belt. So, of course, remember that Giratina's ability stops attacks from Megas, so regular Gardevoir can be used, as long as they're not playing a Hammers list and getting rid of all of your energy, can be used to go through Giratina. But really here, it is the Mega Gardevoir that we really like. Now, you go up to 210 HP, that's pretty nice, but we've got dual typing here. And that is such a huge advantage. Now, you're still fairy, you're still hitting Giratina for weakness, but now you're Psychic type. Mega Mewtwo is, or at least has been, a very big deck lately. And you know what? This will run through Mega Mewtwo like a knife through butter. It is just the best counter. 2 energy, 110 damage, that will one-hit KO a Mega Mewtwo for 2 energy. And as a nice advantage, it's still weak to metal, not psychic, so Mewtwo can't get it back. You've also got a resistance to dark here, I should have mentioned, which is really handy because there are some good dark Pokemon around at the moment. Yveltal is good, Darkrai is good, Zoroark is good. A lot of dark decks seeing a lot of play at the moment. Minus 20 isn't the be-all and end-all, but you know what? I'll take that. Minus 20 damage for every dark attack? Sounds good to me. Now, this attack, 110 damage, is pretty good. You also get to discard as many of your bench Pokemon as you like, and do an extra 10 damage for each one you discard. Now, this has different utilization depending on what you're playing. If you're playing against something like, for instance, a Garchomp deck or a Greninja deck, I know I am referencing Garchomp in every video at the moment, it's not the best deck, but I love it so much. Then you're taking down 130 HP Pokemon. So discarding 2 bench Pokemon a turn to get the one-hit KO, pretty gosh darn good. But if you're up against something like, for instance, I don't know, let's say a Mega Scizor, trying to get all the way up to a one-hit KO is going to be very, very difficult indeed. We will get to numbers and all of that in a little bit. Now, there are 2 ways to play this deck, but no matter which way you play it, there are 2 cards you are going to need. You are going to need the Spirit Link. This is, to get around that rule, generally when you Mega Evolve a Pokemon, you have to end your turn. A Spirit Link means it's a tool you attach, and it means you don't end your turn to Mega Evolve. You're going to want that. The other card that I think you really need in this deck is Mega Turbo. It's a 2 energy attack, so you can attach from your hand, play a Mega Turbo, you've got the energy. Now, as an alternative here, although I see it as a weaker alternative, you can play Max Elixir, which lets you look at the top 6 cards of your deck, find a basic energy you find there, and attach it to a benched basic Pokemon. Really here, Max Elixir's only good the first couple turns, because honestly, you want to be getting these Pokemon going as fast as possible, and Max Elixir only works before you Mega Evolve, which you want to be doing as fast as possible. Not only that, but if you play Max Elixir, you can't pull off a trick like, using a Max Potion and then a Mega Turbo to get the energy straight back again. Also, Max Elixir is not 100%. If you play 12 basic energy, you would expect to hit 3 out of 4. Whereas Mega Turbo, play it if you've got a basic energy in your discard, and it will work. So the first way to play this deck is to just accept you are not getting one-hit KOs, play a consistent deck, and 2-hit KO with healing. Although, like I've said, if you're against non-EX decks, you'll probably be getting 1-hit KOs anyway. Think of things like, for instance, Zoroark or Vespiquen, they will be easily 1-hit KO'd. Now, if you're going this route, there are only really 3 other Pokemon you need. Number 1, you need Shaymin EX to draw cards. That should be fairly obvious. Number 2, you're playing an entirely EX deck, so you're going to need Hooper to grab those EXs. And number 3, you are now going to need Dragonite EX. Use his ability to pick up a couple of basic Pokemon from your discard pile. And of course, what you do here is you discard them using Gardevoir EXs or Mega Gardevoirs to spare, and then get them back with Dragonite. And the beautiful thing about this is that usually, Hooper's going to get Lysandred into the active and could be stranded, or Shaymin's got very low HP. Well, you know what? You can play them and then immediately discard them, so you are fine. Now, the other advantage I should have said about Despair is that you do one-hit KO a Shaymin. That's pretty cool. Now, a couple other things you really want to be doing here. Number 1, you need to be healing. So you use cards like Fairy Drop, Pokemon Center Lady, and maybe even Max Potion. Although if you're playing Max Potion, you will need to use Mega Turbo to get that energy back again. The other thing you need to do in this deck is recover, and you do it with Super Rod and Dragonite. And when I say Super Rod, I mean multiple Super Rod. 2 as an absolute minimum. And the wonderful thing about this deck is that you almost become end-proof in the late game. You take a few prizes, your opponent wants to end you down to a low hand. Well, let's say you're playing 4 Shaymin and 2 Hooper. There's a very good chance they're all going to be back in your deck. Or you're going to draw into a Dragonite or an Ultra Ball, and then Dragonite gets a Hooper or Shaymin from your bench, and then you're rolling again. You play many Hooper, many Shaymin, Super Rod and Dragonite, and you keep recovering these Pokemon. Discard them with Despair, and then either Super Rod them or get them back with Dragonite. And then by the end of the game, your deck is disproportionately cards like Shaymin and Hooper. Hooper gets you Shaymin, of course, and that's going to make it much easier to keep rolling as you go. Now, the stadium you want for this build of the deck is going to be Fairy Garden. Free retreat for all of your Pokemon with any fairy energy attached, and of course the added bonus here that if one of your Pokemon is about to get KO'd, you use Fairy Garden to free retreat, and you discard them off the bench with Despair to stop your opponent getting easy prizes. Now, I've given you a list, Seb Simmons' list for this particular build of the deck. Check it out, there is a link in the description. Now, there is another build of the deck which you can play. Now, I'm less keen on this build of the deck, but it's got some advantages, so let's have a look. And this is what I'm going to refer to as the many text version of Mega Gardevoir. What you do here is you play Skyfield as your stadium, and you just smash. Lots of text, lots of tricks, and going for one-hit KOs. Fewer healing cards, fewer Hooper and Shaymin, and just smashing. So, what kind of Pokemon would you want? Well, number 1, and there is an argument for playing one of these in the other build as well. And remember, the beautiful thing about this Gardevoir list, you play one of a Pokemon, you discard it with Despair, you can then grab it back with Super Rod into the deck or Dragonite into your hand, and reuse it over and over again. Now, I know in this video I'm saying either you play the 2-hit KO healing or you play the many text version. There's nothing to say you can't play the 2-hit KO many healing. and put a Rattata into that deck. It's up to you, ladies and gentlemen. It is, after all, your deck. My goal is just to show you how it works. The Rattata from Evolutions, you play it down onto your bench, and it's got an ability which says discard all Pokemon tools attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So you get rid of something like a Fighting Fury Belt, or you drag something into the active and get rid of a Float Stone to buy yourself a turn, etc. I am a big fan of Rattata from Evolutions. I've actually done a video about Rattata and Raticate as their own deck. Check it out. There is, of course, as always, a link in the description. Remind me if I forget. Another Pokemon I'm a big fan of in this deck is the Hawlucha from Steam Siege. And this has got the ability Sudden Cyclone, and you can play it onto your bench and make your Pokemon switch their active. Now, I know you don't get to choose. Your opponent chooses which Pokemon comes into the active. But you know what? Oftentimes, they've got one attacker, one Pokemon with whom they want to attack. Or they might have a bench of multiple Shaman or whatever. Sometimes you're going to play this and your opponent just puts up the same Pokemon or whatever. But sometimes you are going to force your opponent into a very, very awkward situation. Can't get a one-hit KO on the active, but can KO anything on the bench. Down comes Hawlucha. Remember, this build of the deck is built for taking prizes every turn. It is an aggressive build of the deck. Hawlucha says, oh, you're trying to build up an attacker on the bench and stall for a turn. I'm still getting a prize. I can't KO that. I'm still taking a prize. How about something like an Absol? Now, I'm a big fan of Absol. This is the one from Roaring Skies, and the ability Cursed Eyes. And you'll see a bit of a pattern here. These aren't Pokemon with whom we are attacking. These are Pokemon with abilities, often coming into play abilities. Hooper, Shaman, Absol, Hawlucha, Rattata. Because you can play them onto your bench, take advantage of them while still attacking with Mega Gardevoir. Move 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another of his or her Pokemon. Now, I've talked about the Gyarados deck recently, and again, actually, I've got both an analysis video and a list in the description, so go check it out. If you're unfamiliar, Gyarados is an horrific matchup for Mega Gardevoir. But with Absol, you get to play down the Absol, go and get a KO on a Magikarp on the bench by moving energy from one Pokemon to the Magikarp. Then you get a one-hit KO on the Gyarados, and now the prize trade is going in your favour. They're not going to keep up. Gardevoir without Absol, terrible matchup against Gyarados. Gardevoir with Absol, very, very good matchup indeed. And to be honest, they're my favourites in this deck. One other which I have seen played, which I could see as a bit of fun here, Wobbuffet. Now, Wobbuffet, this is the one from Generations, doesn't have a coming into play ability. It's a when he's active ability. But you know what? This could be useful. Now, you could play 1 or 2 Psychic Energy to actually use the attack Psychic Assault to, hit with Despair Ray and then finish off with Wobbuffet. You basically do 10 more damage than they've already got on them. Despair Ray hits for 110, Psychic Assault will then hit for 120, putting them up to 230 in total. Could play it with that, or you could just go Bide Barricade, stick it in the active, turn off your opponent's abilities, buy yourself a turn. Now, damage-wise, this version of the deck is not completely infallible. You are doing 110 damage. You can play Skyfield, meaning you've got 8 bench Pokemon. You discard all 8 of those bench Pokemon. You go from 110 to 190. And then you play Giovanni's, you go up to 210. You will notice that isn't enough to one-hit KO something like a Mega Scizor. Scizor really is a very, very bad matchup for this deck. But you could use something like an Absol, or you could half hit and finish with a Wobbuffet or something. 210 will KO most things, ladies and gentlemen. Far from perfect, but it will KO most things. In terms of which one of these builds do you want to go with, well, I'm going to leave that for you lovely people to decide. I personally am a fan of the first, the 2-hit KO with healing deck. I think it's very consistent. I think there are very few things that will get easy one-hit KOs. I think it's a good way to play the deck, but sometimes a teched out list can be a lot better. Now, in terms of matchups, this has some very good ones. Giratina, you've got a great matchup, you're hitting for weakness. Mewtwo, you've got a great matchup, you're hitting for weakness. Now, even something like Volcanion, now I know not everybody believes me on this, maybe there's more testing to be done, but if you can use Rattata to get rid of non-EX Volcanion's Fighting Fury Belt, then you can discard 2 bench Pokemon to get a one-hit KO on Volcanion, and then you're trading EX for EX, but you've got less setup than they have because you're attacking for 2 energy, and you know what? I quite like your chances here, especially if you can use something like Hex Maniac to slow them down a little bit. I like your chances against Volcanion. Now, there are some very bad matchups, of course. Rayquaza is not a great matchup for this deck, although go down a couple prizes, play an N, you never know. But Rayquaza can easily one-hit KO. It is in no way, shape or form an unwinnable matchup, but I would say it's unfavourable. And of course, Mega Sizor is almost unwinnable, to be honest. But then again, Mega Sizor has a horrific matchup against Volcanion. So, bit of a rock, paper, scissors thing going on here. I think Mega Gardevoir is one of the best decks in the format at the moment. I think it is a powerhouse of a deck. I think it took a little bit of time for people to get on board with Gardevoir. But now that we've had a bit of time, we've worked it out, we've waited a little bit, this deck is very, very good. It's so good that people are now playing Mega Sizor just to counter it. And when people are playing a deck to counter a deck, you know it must have gained quite a bit of traction. Now, there is a comment section. Let me know what you think about Mega Gardevoir. There are buttons to both like this video and subscribe to this channel. Might I please suggest that you click them both? Now, you can follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and of course, the most important thing as always is to look after yourselves until next time. There is a thumbnail that's just popped up. Please click it, have a look at the video. You never know, you might enjoy it. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.